I want to thank my colleagues in the Senate Republican Conference, specifically my colleagues who have worked on this housing package, our ranker, Senator Pam Helming, Senator Martins. You're going to hear from Senator Palumbo, Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick, as well as I think Senator Mario Matera, which is always a treat. We always love to hear from all of these members. But this is an issue, and I want to thank the members who have worked on this, because this is an issue that we hear a lot. We've heard a lot about. We've heard a lot about affordability, and we hear a lot about housing, the housing crisis in New York State, the lack of affordable housing, and no doubt it is a very real thing. It's a real thing in New York City. It's a real thing on Long Island. It's a real thing in Western New York and everywhere in between. The problem is we have not heard real solutions to this crisis. What we've actually heard, besides sort of political doublespeak from the Democrats and from Governor Hochul, but what we've heard are things that would actually double down on why we're in this crisis to begin with. I always ask the question, why are there not more housing units being built? Well, I know home builders and developers, you know what they love to do? They love to build homes and new developments. Why? That's how they make money. If they're not doing it, it's because they don't believe they can get that return on their, that money back in. Why? Housing's very expensive to build in New York. We've made it, and we continue to make it more expensive by some of these energy policies we're pushing, the climate policies. That is going to make housing more expensive in the state of New York. Full stop. So that's going to exacerbate the issue. Why? Another reason why, because we allow people to stay in rent-controlled apartments that have no business being in a rent-controlled apartment. Their income levels, it's been passed down like a hereditary fiefdom, and that's not why we came up with the idea of rent-controlled apartments. That was for people of low income, of low means, who needed a place. So now you have places that should be online that are not coming online for people who actually need them, and you have people who absolutely could afford an apartment, market rate. They don't have to even search for one. And we're going to hear about means testing, which I know my colleagues are going to talk about. We also, you look around, we've hammered developers. There's this narrative out there that the only house you should own, I think it was Senator Brisport, my learned colleague from Brooklyn there, he says, the only house you should own is the one you live in. So there's a real hostility and an attack on the notion of property rights and on people who own multiple units, whether it's a duplex up by me, whether it's a high-rise in the city of New York. But there's an antagonism and a hostility to the model that someone who provides a home for someone, whether it's an apartment, a condo, that's a bad thing. They shouldn't make any money. Now, look someone is going to own these places. My colleagues would essentially take us to a point where everything is public housing. NYCHA. Look no further. Go into a NYCHA unit today. NYCHA is the worst landlord in the state of New York. And that's what passes for utopia or success by a lot of our colleagues as a solution to the housing crisis. The proposal we're rolling out today is a thought-out, multifaceted, layered response to the housing crisis, and would actually put more people in affordable homes in the state of New York. It would stop the housing welfare in the rent control system. It would foster the building of new units, and by putting more supply, you're gonna put a release valve on that demand, and you're gonna see prices come down. That is the answer. This isn't rocket science. You don't need an MBA from Harvard, Lord knows, or anywhere else to understand this. This is basic economics. But our colleagues, many of them from Manhattan, many of them who live in very posh places, they have a different mindset that they're trying to push with good cause eviction, tenancy for life. It would absolutely collapse the rental market in the state of New York. This proposal is a real answer and a real solution. And you're seeing also, and I want to make a mention before I turn over to Senator Helming, you're seeing a lot of news on squatters. And this, I think, goes to this topic. Property rights in the United States of America, not just New York, in the United States, is one of the oldest inviolable rights when the founding of this country, when we were founded, the idea that you could own property, that your home was your castle, that is being really, that is being questioned at the minimum by a lot of what the debate and the conversations happening both here in the Capitol and across the state. The idea that someone could come into your home, they're there for 30 days, and you can't remove them unless you go to housing court, which could take months or longer, is ridiculous. This is going across the country. New York is being looked at as a joke state. We wonder why there's a housing crisis? It's because of things like that, because we feel that basically if you can get into someone's house, whatever your contract was, if you don't pay, if your lease expires, if you have no business there, but you're there for 30 days, you have a right to that place. That is ridiculous. That is not how this is supposed to work. This conference, the people behind me want to protect property rights. Protect property rights. And we want to put more people into homes. But someone has to build that home. Someone has to build that apartment. Someone has to pay the heat and the utilities. And then they provide that to somebody else. That is the model that has worked. It's worked very well for a long time. It's created wealth, and it's provided a roof over people's heads. And they are actually taking a sledgehammer to it with some of their proposals. This proposal does the opposite. It's a real solution and a real answer to the housing and affordability crisis here in the state of New York, and it does so in keeping with our principles, and I think the principles of most New Yorkers. And I want to thank all the members who've worked on this legislation, this package today, and it's my honor to call up a friend of mine, someone who's been a strong advocate and who's really, I think, stepped into the role as ranker on the Housing Committee, and that is Senator Pam Helming.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're here today, as you heard, because a housing crisis, it's a problem that we can solve. Our Senate Republican Conference is again putting proposed solutions on the table. And as the ranking member of the Senate Housing Committee, I'm urging our legislative colleagues to work in a bipartisan manner to help the people of our state. New York State has the highest overall tax burden in the nation, and homeowners in our state pay among the highest property taxes in the nation. Our state also has the lowest home ownership rate in the entire United States of America. Home ownership used to be the pathway to building equity and generational prosperity for your family. But currently in our state, from the Bronx all the way out to Buffalo, that American dream is unattainable for a large portion of the population. And while the Senate Democrats, by focusing on things like good cause eviction, have created a hostile environment that pits tenants against landlords, we've taken a very different approach to creating more housing that is more accessible and more affordable for more people. Our Republican plan is holistic. I like to think of our plan like a home. It has a room for everyone. We have a room for renters in need of affordable units. We have a room for first-time homebuyers. We have a room for developers and builders. In our plan, we reject forceful government mandates, including those that remove local control and ignore the voice of local taxpayers. Instead, we propose incentives, tax relief, and collaboration with our local governments and school districts. These incentives and tax breaks include extending the 421A program in New York City, and a tax credit to facilitate the infrastructure investments necessary to increase the housing supply, especially in upstate New York. We propose tax credits to build manufactured homes, a great low-cost entry into home ownership. We want to reduce regulatory burdens and streamline the permitting process. And we have a solution to help ensure that rent-regulated apartments are available to the people who need them, not held in perpetuity by the wealthy. Like so many of you, I hear from people in their 20s and 30s, young couples, families, including my 2 children. Homes are not only hard to come by, they're out of reach for young families. I also hear from seniors who want to downsize but stay in their communities. but the housing just isn't available or it just isn't affordable. I hear from our workforce, many who are public employees, police officers, teachers, nurses. They can't afford to buy and they can't afford to build. This conference doesn't want any more of our workers or our families moving out of state because they can't afford to live here or they can't find the home that they need. Every home needs a solid foundation. And with our Republican plan, we're offering a solid foundation to begin to address the housing crisis. To talk more about our proposal, I'd like to introduce my colleague on the Senate Housing Committee, Senator Jack Martins.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues for working together to come up with what is effectively a common sense approach to the affordable housing crisis. There is an affordable housing crisis. Everyone recognizes it. There are opportunities in this plan to address this issue, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but certainly within the next month, 2 months, year. There are 1.1 million stabilized housing units in New York City. Now, everyone assumes that rent-controlled and rent-stabilized units go only to those who are means-tested, the working poor and poor that need the help. The reality is, by DHCR's own New York City housing survey from 2023, and you can go back and take a look at it, far too many of these apartments are occupied by people making multiples of the area median income, which is the standard that is used to determine affordability. So out of the 1.1 million homes that are in New York City today, rent-stabilized apartments, 30% of those, over 300,000 apartments, are occupied by people making more than the area median income. Over 175,000 of those units are occupied by people making twice the area median income. And by the way, the area median income is $98,000. So you have nearly 200,000 apartments, rent-stabilized apartments today, occupied by people making more than $200,000. That's absurd. And we talk about a housing crisis and an affordable housing crisis. There is a way that this state today, the Democrat majorities in the Senate and in the Assembly, and most specifically the governor, can move forward with an immediate response to this housing crisis. And that's to make sure we means test these stabilized units, so that when those units come up for renewal, if they are earning more than the area median income, they're asked to vacate and make room for somebody else. Because if you're making less than $90,000 a year, if you're making less than $70,000 a year, if you can't afford to get to work in New York City, there is no excuse that your apartment is being held by somebody making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and has not been made available to you. So yes, there is a housing crisis. And while we work on that crisis and while we work with developers to build the housing that is necessary to get out of that crisis, something that is going to take years, even if we were to put a shovel in the ground today, we can actually knock off 200 or 300,000 of those 500,000 units that the governor identified as essential to the continued affordability in New York State. We can do that in the next 12 months by simply adopting the plan that we have here today. So I want to thank all of my colleagues, most particularly our ranker on housing, Senator Pam Helming, who's done a wonderful job in bringing together these great ideas, in putting this plan together and affording New Yorkers housing options that will actually be real and in real time. With that, I want to take the opportunity to introduce my colleague, Senator Anthony Palumbo. Senator.
Thank you, Senator Martins, and thank you to my colleagues. My area that I'm going to discuss is 421A. I think we can all agree, regardless of party, position, location in the state, we have a housing crisis. I carried and passed and had signed into law a housing bill to create a fund in the 5 eastern towns of Long Island. I'm out in Senate District 1. 4 towns, town boards adopted it. They put it up for a referendum. and it passed in all 4 towns. So people recognize that the volume of homes, particularly out where I live, is low. It's a very, very simple supply and demand. This is not rocket science, as the leader mentioned earlier. And I have some statistics which are actually quite striking. So 421A expired, and those of you know it's a tax incentive to build affordable units. 421A expired in June of 2022. This was reported last month by an Albany paper, I'll say it, City and State. 2022, there were 45,593 applications for new units in 2022. Last year, there were 9,909, 78% reduction. And as mentioned earlier by my colleagues, this is the problem when you have these progressive one-party group that says landlords are the devil. They're terrible people. We need to beat up on them and put forward more progressive legislation like good cause and make housing, actually, it's counterintuitive. Housing is more difficult to obtain. Because why? People do not invest in New York. Why would they even consider doing that? Because unfortunately, there are people who want to spend a lot of money on housing in the great state of New York, the greatest state in the union, without question. But they don't, because they have obligations. They have obligations to try and actually turn a profit. And that's the really simple logic behind 421A. It's an incentive to build these houses, and then ultimately you recoup the money over time. And more importantly, it just creates houses. And that's really, and apartments. And that's really the concern that we have. So just very simply, reinstate 421A. The proof is in the pudding. You can rhetorically jump up and down and bang your fist and say, oh, this is terrible, this is great. No, it's not. And you can couch it however you want to couch it. The bottom line is this very clearly and succinctly proves the point that it was working when you go from 45,000 to just under 10,000 applications for new units in 1 year. So, I thank my colleagues for being here. With that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick, who has a few words for you.
Thank you. As was stated just earlier by Senator Martins, we're acknowledging that there's a housing crisis, that we need more housing. But similar to what was stated just a few minutes ago about enforcing means testing, we have a problem with squatters. And if we address the squatters, we will also have more available housing. There have been several high-profile cases recently, and one in particular was a horrific situation where the squatters killed the landlord who came to the property, killed her and stuffed her in a duffel bag, and hid her in a closet where her family found her. And the theme that we see with that kind of horrific crime is that we continue to embolden people that do wrong. We continue to give more power to the criminals than law-abiding citizens. In this particular case, and my bill is addressing squatters and trying to change the way they are treated legally, squatters are given more rights than people that stay there and legally pay rent. They have to be evicted. The process takes months and months and months if you can even get them out. And all while during that period, the landlord must continue to pay their mortgage, their real estate taxes, their homeowner's insurance, or else they risk losing their investment. So the bill that I've proposed is going to allow legal ramifications so that we can now, legal remedies, to get these squatters out of the property and not treat them as tenants simply because they have wrongly approached this property, moved in, and now the landlord can't get them out. We need to do better, and I do believe that, as was stated, the problem is there. We're acknowledging the problem, but if we don't do things immediately to address it, the problem is years away from being fixed. But my colleagues today have suggested that there are things that we can do to remedy this situation in just within a year, within a few months. And we need to do that to address it, because I too have children who I'd love to have live in this state, but the longer that we vilify our landowners and not support them, the longer this economic crisis will continue and the housing crisis will only get worse. So with that, I'd like to introduce my dear friend and a Long Island colleague, Senator Mario Matera.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And I'd like to thank Leader Ort also, too, for making sure that we are here today to talk about all our housing issues and our issues with the squatter problems. But Senator Helming, thank you so much for taking the lead with this today. And again, you see there's different issues that we have going on here. But you know what? The squatter situation is very, very serious. We all know this. This is an epidemic of squatting impacts every segment of our region. It is another example of acceptance of lawlessness like cashless bail that has been pushed by Democrats and have put our police, our residents, and now our homeowners at risk. Bad politics like cashless bail took the tools away from our law enforcement. I'm going to show you guys a photo of a gentleman, Tom Buckleman. Tom Buckleman just went to a home to do a plumbing job. Tom Buckleman received a phone call to go and winterize the home that somebody just purchased. He walks inside the home, and all of a sudden somebody runs out, make believe they had a gun, and runs away. The landlord and Tom, as the plumber, went in there to go do the plumbing job. The squatter came in and pummeled him with a baseball bat. Till today, this is 2 years ago, till today, Tom Buckleman cannot function properly. I was just on the phone with him today. And you know what? 6 crimes was arrested. The gentleman, not a gentleman, excuse me, was arrested 6 times in a month. And the only time that he was put away in jail was because he pummeled Tom Buckleman. Is that amazing? In other words, that's what it takes for a squatter to be removed from a home. One was a drug-related crime, and was released on cashless bail. When a homeowner wants to be rid themselves of a squatter or trespasser, which is an unlawful occupant, it takes a lot of time, years. Another constituent in my area, 3 years it took to get the squatter to be removed from the home in Hauppauge. 3 years, which we all know is going to cost a lot of money with a lot of lawyer fees. I have introduced an aggressive legislation to provide an owner a quick remedy to remove those who try to steal their homes and gives our police the tools that they need to assist those who are victimized by squatters. For far too long, the laws of New York State have tied hands of our homeowners and law enforcement, and we must give their power back and tell the criminals that their time is up. My legislation, S8867, patterned after a new Florida bill that passed with a broad bipartisanship support, and is sitting on Governor DeSantis' desk right now. It would allow the method whereby a property owner can immediately have somebody removed from the premises by simply submitting a sworn complaint to police officers containing certain facts. This will cause a prompt removal of an unauthorized person from the residential real property by a police officer on the spot without court intervention, and will protect our homeowners, our property owners. I know we always talk about landlords. I call them property owners because we all know the most big investment that we have is our homes. For those who worry about unlawful removals, this legislation does have strong protections for any person wrongfully removed. If successful, the person could receive triple damages, restoration of possession, and attorney fees against wrongdoer. While that protection is needed to protect from unscrupulous action, it is vital that we are aggressive in protecting our legal owners. I have 4 bills that are out, S8867, S8866, S8868, S8669, that will protect our homeowners from these squatters, these criminals. Thank you. And I am going to give this back to close to our Senator Helming. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Matera. I just want to quickly say, again, thank you to all my colleagues who have been truly invested in coming up with potential solutions to get more housing units online. We support new home ownership opportunities. We support assisting landlords to get more housing units online for tenants. And again, to all my colleagues, thank you very much. Special thank you to the committee members, Senator Jack Martins and Senator George Borrello. And at this time, happy to open up to questions.
Questions? Elise, touched on this in the presser. How do you feel with the housing council work with Senate President are pushing for elevation and tenant protections? Did you see that they wrote on?
I think that's a great question. I think, as I mentioned, for us, it's making sure that we have a more balanced housing program. When you look at good cause eviction, I think we have to ask ourselves, how many new housing units is that going to bring to the table? That's why we have the alternative plan that, again, will create more opportunity for tenants, more opportunities for property owners, more opportunities for people to be successful in finding housing that's more affordable.
Next question.
We talk about out-migration, people leaving because they can't afford to live anywhere. I just came back from Florida. Homes are going up. Every time I go back, there are new complexes going in. There are homes being built. It seems like every time I go, there's new homes being built. What are states like Florida doing differently?
I think that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought it up. I think the number one issue, and we've seen a lot of statistics lately, reports that have come out and said the biggest impediment to doing business in New York State, that includes building new homes, it's the amount of regulations. There was a study that just came out recently by the Santa Poll that indicated that CEOs in our area are saying that it's the state government that's standing in its own way from building more homes, from getting more work in this area. So we've got to look at these regulations. We've got to take a balanced approach, be practical, but we have got to build more homes that are more affordable to more people.
But the governor wants to, she wants to already impose up to 5 state prisons in the next year, just to expedite not supportive for severe visitation as discussed right.
Our conference is not supportive of the closure of those prisons for a number of public safety issues. And when it comes to using those properties to build homes, our biggest question, one of the biggest questions is, will they be compelled to follow local zoning codes? We support our local municipalities, our school districts.
Any other questions?
On topic, the governor this year has put forward a program where municipalities are basically prioritized for certain discretionary grants if they certify themselves as quote pro-housing communities. I'm curious your thoughts on that program. Do you think it's effective? And specifically, what local communities are asked to do? Do you think what they're asked to do is enough to build new homes?
So our localities, if they want to participate in that program, are being asked to pass a resolution. It's a simple process. But I think the challenge, I represent a primarily rural district with small communities, is in order to apply for those grants to begin with, it's a very competitive process. We need to equalize, revise, revamp our grant approval process so that it's fair and equitable to all communities, regardless of their size.